Well, the reality is that the Prime Minister personally decided to appoint Lord Mandelson as the ambassador to the United States, and in so doing, he has humiliated and embarrassed this nation on the international stage, because this Lord Mandelson is someone who described himself as the best pal of a paedophile, someone who advised that paedophile, when in prison, to use that time in prison as an opportunity. Truly shocking. And there are two separate issues here that require proper examination. Firstly, the judgment of the Prime Minister, and then secondly, did he inadvertently mislead the House last Wednesday in responding to the Leader of Opposition? And let's look at the judgment of the Prime Minister. We know now that he received a 2-page document as he made the personal decision to appoint Lord Mandelson, outlining some of his links to the paedophile. And yet he carried on with that decision to appoint him. So he made that appointment in that knowledge. That is woefully, woefully incompetent judgment. He then made the judgment last week in the knowledge that there was a cache of emails about Lord Mandelson's links to this paedophile. He made the judgment as a lawyer who supposedly is forensic, not to ask the questions about what was in the emails. That seems to me an absolute failure of judgment. And then he made the judgment to come to this House and say that he had confidence in the man over whom he knew there was a cache of emails that he thought it was inappropriate to ask the detail about. The whole point of lawyers and barristers is they do that DD, that diligence. But no, not our Prime Minister. Which brings me on to the critical issue of whether the Prime Minister inadvertently misled the House. He said two things to the Leader of the Opposition. Firstly, twice, he said he had confidence in Lord Mandelson, and yet he knew the day before there's a cache of emails that he didn't want to know the detail of about Lord Mandelson's links to Epstein. And then, the day after, he fired him. How is it credulous to believe that you can have confidence in a man given those two facts within a 24-hour period? Even more significantly, the Prime Minister said that full due process had been followed during the appointment. We now learn that this is not the case, because actually the due process was carried out after the decision by the Prime Minister to appoint Lord Mandelson and after it had been announced to the world at large. And therefore, those two things cannot be true. Either full due process was carried out before the decision to appoint, or it was carried out afterwards. It was not carried out during. And for that reason, I regrettably conclude personally that the Prime Minister inadvertently misled this House of Commons and the British people. And I think, therefore, that this Prime Minister needs to come to the House and give absolute clarity on what he knew, when, why he made those decisions, and why he chose not to ask the detailed forensic investigations at the appropriate time.
I call the father of the House, Sir Edward.
Well, that speech we just heard was absolutely risible, frankly. And I just give him some advice. You know, don't do the whip's office dirty work for them. Oh, well, of course I gave way to him. Yeah.
Thank you. I thank the right honourable gentleman. I'd like to give him some advice. Please do not patronise me.
Yeah, I'm just trying to give him some helpful advice, but there we are. Oh, well, of course.
Actually, it's advice for the member opposite. Those that lick the feet of the unworthy gain them for themselves nothing but a dirty tongue.
Sir Edward, please.
But joking apart, this is really a very serious moment for our country and for Parliament. Whether you like him or not, President Trump is of incredible importance to our country. He's just about to arrive here. He just must think that we in this country are complete plonkers, frankly, for the way that we've handled all this. First of all, he had a very good relationship with the previous ambassador. She was just swept aside. And then a man was appointed who had produced him in the past. All right, that man is a skilled operator and has built up a relationship. President Trump himself probably is rather embarrassed about his relationship with Epstein. And then he finds all over the media this is dragged up a day before one of his most important visits, which is of great importance to his country and our country. And he knows that there are going to be very difficult questions in the press conference. The President of the United States must be absolutely furious about what is going on. So this is a very serious moment for us, and we have to take it extremely seriously. And I hope, and I'm sure the government does. Now, I'll just repeat what I said in the urgent question on Thursday. I've seen so many of these scandals, and it's usually not the original scandal or alleged scandal that is the problem. It's the cover-up. And therefore, to try and be helpful to the government, we've already heard from the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. It is just an absurd part of our processes that if there is a monumental scandal, then we have a public inquiry, and officials, ministers, everybody must be dragged, every document must be produced to the public inquiry, but governments can just brush aside a select committee. So I just tell them, and I'm generally trying to be helpful now. Obviously, a bad mistake was made, but an even worse mistake is being made if you're not honest with Parliament and you don't release every single document. And there are so many questions that need to be asked and could be answered if the government, the Foreign Office, was honest in these questions. Why was Mandelson chosen, given his known past associations with Epstein and his previous sackings? Were the risks merely misjudged, or did the existing vetting process fail to assess them properly? And the Prime Minister claimed he didn't know the full extent of the emails. We've no reason not to take him at his word. Obviously, he tells the truth. But this raises serious questions about what assurances of information he received, from whom, and whether that constituted adequate due diligence. What exact checks were carried out at appointment stage? What was known, by whom, and when? If some of the unsavoury aspects of the former ambassador's friendship with Mr. Epstein were known but deemed worth the risk, what criteria were used to make that decision? Was the Cabinet Office's propriety and ethics team sufficiently rigorous? Was any personal, institutional or political bias exhibited in how risks were weighed? The government has stated commitments on transparency, integrity and protecting victims of abuse or sexual violence. Having a senior representative like an ambassador whose past communications appear to mitigate, defend or minimise a convicted child sex offender must run counter to these values. And was that considered at that stage of the vetting process? How does the government reconcile this incident with its stated positions? Why was the appointment made knowing there were links without understanding their full extent? Why was the Prime Minister publicly defending Lord Mandelson up until the revelations emerged, only to sack him less than a day when the media pressure rose? Was he sacked for the content of what was revealed, or merely because the situation became embarrassing? Lord Mandelson was appointed to arguably the most important diplomatic role in Her Majesty's diplomatic service. This is a time of intense international pressure. So, as I've mentioned already, President Trump is operating the levers of power in a way that we have rarely seen in the post-war world. What assessment has the government made of the damage done to Britain's diplomatic standing by having such an important ambassador removed abruptly under scandal? Light is the best disinfectant, and the public have a right, and this House, through its Select Committee, has a right to be informed. Ministers must ensure that the full record of Lord Mandelson's communication with Epstein be disclosed, and soon. We must also be told whether any of the information the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary or any other minister have provided to the public has turned out to be inaccurate, whether intentionally or in good faith. While the ambassador has been sacked, this incident, Madam Deputy Speaker, is far from over. There are too many questions which remain unanswered. It is the obligation and the responsibility of government to ensure that Parliament and the public are given a full and frank exposition of this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting this important emergency debate today, and I congratulate my right honourable friend for having secured it. He made a series of excellent points, as did the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and I agree with all of those points. It is extraordinary that on the eve of the President's state visit, we are talking about the US ambassador who's been sacked in scandal. And there are as many questions that we all have as are unanswered questions. There are many questions I will also ask today, Mr. Speaker, but the Prime Minister needs to do three things. The Prime Minister needs to come clean about what he knew and when he knew it, not send his junior ministers to cover for him. The Prime Minister needs to publish the Mandelson Epstein files in full. The Prime Minister needs to take responsibility for the appointment of Lord Mandelson as ambassador to Washington. But the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, is not here because he is hiding from Parliament, hiding from questions. And I know that he is a busy man, but confidence in him and in his government rests on him being able to account for what happened. And so far, no one is taking any responsibility. We have our ambassador in the US sacked over his relationship with a man convicted of child sex offences. What's more, and this tells you everything you need to know, this was an appointment apparently forced through by the Prime Minister and/or his Chief of Staff. We see a political ally pushed ahead of qualified candidates because the Prime Minister and Morgan McSweeney admired his talent for mixing with the rich and powerful, despite his known links to a man who was publicly known as a convicted paedophile and a convicted sex trafficker. It is now very clear, given the speeches that we've heard before, Mr. Speaker, and everything in the public domain, it is now very clear that Peter Mandelson should never have been appointed. And it is now also clear that the Prime Minister knew that there were major concerns when he came to this House just last Wednesday. But instead of taking action, he expressed confidence in him. Why on earth did he do so? Was he poorly advised, or was it just his own poor judgment? In every single one of his government scandals till date, far from being the decisive man of conscience he promised to be, he has shriveled from leadership. He has dodged responsibility. He has hidden behind others, just as he's doing today, and he has come to this House and hidden behind process and lawyerly phrases. The Prime Minister has shown no courage, no judgment, no backbone. And if he can't see it, if they can't see it, I can assure them that the British public can. Prime Minister has turned out to be everything he claimed to uphold. This is a government of sleaze and scandal, and Labour MPs know it. I'll be interested to see how many of them actually stand up to defend their government. Mr. Speaker, the British public, and especially the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, deserve that for once the Prime Minister be straight and honest with us. He must immediately do three things. As I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, he must apologise to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein for ever having appointed Peter Mandelson as ambassador. How is it that this has still not happened? No apology. Second, as I said, he must publish the Mandelson Epstein files in full, all the information that he had at his disposal, both when he made the appointment and when he came to the House last week expressing full confidence. And third, he must make sure that someone takes responsibility. Everyone now agrees that Peter Mandelson should not have been appointed. We've heard so much from my right honourable friend about endless scandal, conflicts of interest with China and indeed with Russia. So why was he appointed? Was it a failure of vetting? Was it that the advisers hid information from the Prime Minister? Or was it that the Prime Minister knew and made the decision anyway? Someone needs to take responsibility. I give way to my right honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. And does she agree that we've seen a rapid transformation from the Prince of Darkness into a grovelling Lord Yum-Yum? But one has to ask, why was the British Prime Minister surprised? had he never heard the tale of the turtle and the scorpion that meet at the side of the river? Shouldn't the Prime Minister have realised that the poor old scorpion simply can't help what's in its nature?
I completely agree with my right honourable friend. I think the story is The Frog and the Scorpion. It's one of my favourite childhood stories. Everyone knows. Everyone knew what Lord Mandelson had been up to. It is simply not tenable for anyone on those benches to hold the line on this one, to bury their heads in the sand and hope it goes away, least of all the Prime Minister. But we now know that the Prime Minister was aware of the compromising emails last Wednesday at Prime Minister's questions, and yet he came to the House and said that he had confidence in his ambassador, and many of them cheered. Now they're all looking at their phones. Most of them don't have the courage to look me in the eye. They were cheering last week. Now they're full of shame. Why on earth did he do that? At any point, did he ask his staff, oh, sorry, are they proud? Are they proud? No. I'll continue. At any point, did he ask his staff what more information might surface? Because that morning, Lord Mandelson was saying more information would surface. Did he receive a briefing about this ahead of Prime Minister's questions? It is inconceivable that he did not. Inconceivable. Ministers are now claiming that new information subsequently came to light, new information that they didn't have. The story is all mixed and messed up, and they know it. What information appeared that was not in the original vetting? We'd like to hear that when the Minister gives his statement. And there are still more questions to answer. When did the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff speak with Peter Mandelson last week, and what did he discuss with him? Do they have the courage to tell us that? We are told that Morgan McSweeney spent hours on the phone to the ambassador, hours on the phone, at the same time that Lord Mandelson was dodging calls from the Foreign Office. What were they talking about? Those are questions about what happened just last week. But how did all this come to happen last year? I think the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee has asked some excellent questions. But I ask the Minister this: what led to Lord Mandelson's appointment in the first place? How was it that a man with known links to a child sex offender came to be appointed? I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
An additional question is, was there any external influence? Did Tony Blair or any of his friends, Mandelson's friends, have anything to do with this appointment?
The honourable gentleman asks a very good question, and I hope the Minister is able to provide an answer, because all of us in this House across parties want to know. We want to know how it was that Lord Mandelson's appointment happened in the first place, because as I see it, there are only three possibilities. First, that there was a failure of vetting. But are we really supposed to believe, Mr. Speaker, are we really supposed to believe that this is the security services' fault? I don't think so. Did they not drag up the intimate relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which was discussed last week? The second possibility, a bit more likely, is that the Prime Minister's advisers kept information from him. If that happened, that would be incredibly serious. Yes, I give way to the right honourable gentleman.
It's on that particular point. Does she agree with me that no matter what happened or didn't happen, that a Prime Minister, a leader, has to shoulder the responsibility, and it's absolutely appalling, the idea that they would then blame the staff around them. It is their responsibility. They answer to the House. No excuse.
My right honourable friend makes an excellent point. This is a Prime Minister who hides behind everybody else, whether it's his advisers or whether it's his junior ministers or his backbenchers. That's what he does. And if he does want to blame advisers, which one was it? Who kept it from him? Why have they not apologised and resigned? No one taking responsibility. And thirdly, which my right honourable friend alluded to, the most likely but most worrying reason of all is that the Prime Minister had plenty of information to suggest that Lord Mandelson should not be appointed. Plenty of information, but he chose to appoint him anyway. Even at the time, Mr. Speaker, eyebrows were raised about this appointment. There were very many critics. I remember it at the time. Now we're reading in the papers that the Prime Minister overruled security advice not to appoint Lord Mandelson. Is this true? The Minister should tell us. It is time, Mr. Speaker, for the Prime Minister to come clean. He needs to come out of hiding. This issue will not go away, Mr. Speaker. The government cannot play for time. We will be back here again and again until all of these documents are published. We will be back until someone takes responsibility. This is a political crisis on top of an economic crisis, all of the government's own making. They are distracted now But they came into office with no plan for the country, no idea what they stood for, and no vision for what they wanted to achieve. And because of this, they have been lurching from disaster to disaster. Winter fuel, tax rises, welfare chaos, scandal. The Prime Minister's failing leadership rebooted after just 1 year. The only plan that they came into office with was a promise they made again and again to the British public that they would restore honesty and integrity to government. That was their defining mission. That was their grand plan, and it is in tatters. So far, in a year, we have had an anti-corruption minister sacked for corruption, a homelessness minister sacked for evicting tenants, a housing secretary sacked for dodging housing tax, a transport secretary sacked for fraud, a director of strategy. The speechwriter apparently lost only yesterday in scandal. The minister can shake his head. It should be shame that he's shaking his head in. I have not said anything that is not true. And now finally we have a US ambassador sacked for his links with a known child sex offender. They claim to care about violence against women and girls until they actually have to do something about it. Where is the apology to those victims? I know the Prime Minister doesn't like difficult questions, Mr. Speaker, but it is his judgment that is being called into question, and he owes it to this country to come clean.
Stephen Flynn.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I often think it's a grave pity in this House that the cameras tend to just be trained on the individual speaking, because it meant that the public did not get the opportunity that we did earlier on to look at the faces of the Labour MPs as this debate began, to see the glum, serious look on their faces as they recognise the significance of the situation that faces their Prime Minister here and now. And I'm sure it's a glum, angry, serious look that's shared not just by the Treasury front bench in the building here today, but those who are flogged in the public domain across broadcasting stations throughout the course of last week. And if I may, the Chief Whip is no longer in his place, but I would like to think that on Sunday that was the first occasion where he was happy to be in his new role, so he did not have to appear on the Sunday media rounds as the Business Secretary to defend the indefensible, to tell us all in the public domain that Peter Mandelson has singular qualities that nobody else on these aisles, nobody else on the planet possibly have, that make him fitting to be the ambassador to the United States of America. What a pitiful state to find ourselves in. What a pitiful state for the Prime Minister to find himself in. And this is mired in politics, I hate to say, because this is a political decision by the Prime Minister. He chose to stand at that dispatch box last week and not tell us, but tell the public that there was nothing to see here, that he had absolute confidence in Lord Mandelson. It is the Prime Minister, who chose to ignore the facts that were plainly in front of him, not for weeks, not for hours, not for days, but for months. He was the man who appointed Peter Mandelson to be the ambassador to the United States, the man who said to an FT journalist earlier this year to fuck off, because it was being, his quote, not mine, because he was being inquired about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. That was what Lord Mandelson said. He said it was an FT obsession. Well, guess what? It's our obsession now. And we are going to make sure that we get to the bottom of this. The Prime Minister is not above the scrutiny of the House of Commons, neither is he above the scrutiny of the public at home. But the greatest scandal of all, is the fact that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom appointed a man to that role, knowing that that man had maintained a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, despite the fact that Jeffrey Epstein had been convicted in 2008 in Florida. Convicted for having 14-year-old girls masturbate him. And the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom thought it was fitting for the best friend of that individual to hold the highest diplomatic office in the United States of America on behalf of the people of these Isles. What a complete disgrace. And the only thing that seems to have caused any consternation for the Prime Minister in any of this is not that that happened, but the fact that for a short period, Peter Mandelson appeared to think Jeffrey Epstein was innocent. Yeah. Which draws us to the conclusion that if Peter Mandelson had thought that Jeffrey Epstein had maintained the friendship but thought he was guilty, he would still be in post. What has happened to the moral compass of this place, of the office of Prime Minister, where we can simply accept a rationale such as that? How can any victim of child sex abuse in these Isles or elsewhere have confidence in the structures that we put in place when the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and the Minister shakes his head? Is there an intervention that he wants to make? Is there something that he disagrees with in that assessment of those facts? Or does he want to present the additional detail to this House which makes any of that untrue whatsoever? No. I notice he's not shaking his head now, but I tell you who is shaking their head: the public at him and his Prime Minister for the decisions that they have taken. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're going into recess. All of us are mindful of the fact that this House is shutting down. But when we come back, we expect answers. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, he hopes that this is going to go away. But I and every other member who is sitting in this House right now can assure him that it is not.
But let's take this as maybe a practical decision for a second, and take Mandelson his own measure of himself. He loves being called the Dark Lord and all the rest of it. He preens himself on being a master of the dark arts, spin, message management, political tactics, manipulation of the truth, a repertoire of things that most people would not be proud of. Now, if the government thinks that these actually make up for, in some way, in a skill, make up for his sins, well, no. I mean, firstly, he's not as good as being cracked up to be, frankly, and he's being measured, remember this, against Karen Pierce, the officer in place, probably the best ambassador, certainly the most revered. And after her, Tim Barrow, who was our ambassador to the European Union during Brexit, and was the NSA, was the National Security Advisor, knows all these things to the tips of his fingers. That better than them? Oh, pull the other one. Right. So, I'm coming to the end, Mr. Speaker, before you frown anymore. Number 10 claims Mandelson was economical with the truth. Mandelson claims he told the whole truth. Both statements cannot be true. So the questions I pose to the Minister are: will the government rule out Mandelson being brought back into government? Number 10 refused to rule him out, giving him another job earlier this week, or last week. If Mandelson withheld information during the vetting process, is he going to lose the Labour whip? I'm looking at Mr Bergen when I say that. Is he going to have to resign from the House of Lords? Will Lord Mandelson be receiving compensation, as some reports to the media suggest he'll be paid £100,000 of taxpayers' money? What? Yeah. Will the Prime Minister, his Chief of Staff, his Cabinet Secretary and the Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office appear before the select committees of the House to give evidence? And will the Minister provide the House with the documents required to answer our questions as to who knew what and when? That is the Propriety and Ethics Team report, the Development Vetting report, if it exists. And I say this to the Minister. There are many quotes in the newspapers from his own party about their horror regarding his decisions and processes. No, and I really am coming to an end. I may quote just one of them. This is a long-standing senior Labour member, but he's anonymous. I care that this culture of turning a blind eye to the horrendous behaviour is endemic at the top of society. And I agree with him. So when individuals with these associations are ushered back to the heart of government, are we right to ask what standards now govern appointments to public life? Impunity is not a right. Impropriety is not a technicality. And survivors of crime should not have to do the heavy lifting of holding the powerful to account. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, Mr. Speaker, a bill is being put to the House later today, well, it's being put to the House already, imposing a duty of candor. on public authorities and officials. My last and single question to the Minister is, will his government now live up to the words in that bill?
Yeah.